Welcome to Voodoo Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of Crisol, Theater of Idols. I played on the Xbox Series X. It's also available on the Series S and PC. So let's get into the story. First of all, you play as Gabriel or Gabriel. Why that way? Because this takes place in Hispania and it's very clearly Spanish in origins and nature of this game. He is sent by the god of the sun to an island where they have turned their back on the ways of the sun and they now worship the sea. He is a soldado and it is his goal to defeat this false god. Unfortunately, his first attempt fails miserably. He dies and, well, is brought back by the sun. But he must prove that he is a worthy soldier of the sun, so he is given weapons that are fueled by his own blood. And to reload these weapons, they all protrude spikes and drain blood from him. It's pretty gruesome. Seriously, with the amount of blood that he pours into these weapons, you'd think he worshipped La Magra or something like that. But he ends up teaming up with the Solari, which is a group of essentially rebels here who worship the sun still. And while there are twists and turns along the way, I didn't fully expect the ending. I actually really liked the way the story went in this game. I wasn't ready for a lot of those twists and turns, honestly. Which that's always appreciated when you've been watching movies and playing video games for as long as I have, and you're sitting there predicting every twist and turn and being right far too often. Now let's move on to the audio, and the first thing I'm going to say is the voiceover work is rough. I played it in English, and while the voiceover is still not the worst I've ever heard, it's pretty rough in a lot of places. Very early on, Gabriel, it sounds like somebody reading the script for the very first time. It does improve throughout, but it never reaches the point of being good. I would say Mediodía has probably the best voice acting behind her in the game. Even when it comes down to just all the side characters and the lesser characters, there's really not good voice work going on. It's very hit or miss. Some do better than others. You'll be listening to a conversation where one actor is doing pretty well and the other is doing horrible. It's a mixed bag. But moving beyond that, the music is really good in this game. I really liked it. I think it worked incredibly well. And then you have the sound effects, which I do think work very well in this game. I really loved the gun sound effects. They are meaty. They sound like they have force. But even beyond that, it's all the little sound effects. The sound effects of the enemies, the sound effects of your footsteps, the sound effects of the rain are really good. The only annoyance I would say I had with the sound effects is there's a certain collectible that is releasing crows from cages, but you'll just hear random crows and it'll make you think that there's a caged one nearby. That's an annoyance, but the crow sound effects are good and so are the caged sound effects. Now let's move on to the gameplay mechanics and whatnot, and this is a first-person shooter action. I don't want to say horror, but it kind of has some survival horror-ish elements. I say what I say about the horror part because it just really didn't get into the horror part. It was definitely gruesome and gory, which I guess fall into horror, but I like my horror to be scarier. That being said, it definitely captures some survival horror elements with not exactly limited resources, but a lot of puzzle solving. Getting around requires a lot of puzzle solving. It's like any good survival horror game, you've got to solve puzzles to progress through areas, and some of them are really good in this game. I really appreciated some of these. None of them really hit the point where I was like, oh, this is incredibly frustrating, I hate this. They were just challenging enough that I enjoyed them. I appreciate that. Sometimes there are games that make it too easy, some that make it too hard, some that throw advice at you that you're not looking for yet. This didn't do any of that. This hit a good sweet spot. But then you have plenty of enemies, not a huge variety in the enemies. You've got your basic statues, but they're basically wooden statues that come after you. You've got some more advanced enemies as it goes on, which have some pretty interesting designs. I'd say they all have their own way of being defeated, but it's shoot them. They do each fight differently though, which does make the encounters unique. Not super unique, but you get used to how they fight. You have to figure out how they fight and adapt to them. You get several different guns, not a huge variety. You got a pistol, a sniper rifle, shotgun, SMG, etc. And you can upgrade those as well as your character. The upgrades are kind of hit or miss. All the weapons upgrades, super handy. And once you've fully upgraded the pistol, it is a beast. Some of the upgrades for your character, though, are hit or miss. There are some really good ones, like your last bullet in the magazine will do more damage, or you have a certain percentage chance of shooting an enemy and retaining that bullet. But then you have other ones that I just didn't find as useful, like you have to inject yourself with blood syringes. We'll get into that. There's one to speed that up. I never found it to be such a slow process that it needed to be sped up, which then led to another ability where if you take lethal damage, it'll just consume a syringe instead. But again, I could replenish myself with a syringe fast enough that I rarely died. I did die a few times, but generally speaking, it wasn't that big of a problem. Now, as I mentioned, all of your guns are fueled by your own blood, which does mean that you give up health every time you reload, which is how this game kind of runs in the opposite direction of a survival horror game. While they have the puzzles, you get a lot of health. You can absorb it from certain dead animals and dead bodies, as well as you have the blood syringes. There are also fountains around that just refill with blood somehow. But really, throughout the entire game, I only ran into one spot where I was like, I am desperate for some syringes. I've only got 2 left. I'm getting low here, guys. I think the only gameplay issue I did have with this was the game really needed to give you control over the flashlight. If you were in a dark enough area, it would kick on, but there were some areas that were pretty dark and I would have liked to kick on the flashlight, but you couldn't. But let's move on to the controls. And the controls are a bit rough. Overall, they work well. They're just not as smooth as other FPSs that are out there. If you're sprinting, you will not immediately go into a crouch. That's kind of a slower process than you might want it to be. I think the aiming worked well. The movement is a bit slow. There is no dodge mechanic, which would be nice, but also at the same time, kind of not necessary. Now let's get into the graphics and visuals. And graphically, it's not the strongest game. Not that it necessarily is bad, but it is going for a somewhat more realistic look and just not having all the detail necessary for that, as well as some repeated textures, a decent amount of them really. As well as, while there is a variety in the generic enemy, the grunt kind of enemy, there's not a huge variety, so you do get used to how they all look. They do have some really fun animations with them though, because they're wooden dummies. You can like shoot off a limb and they'll switch limbs and pull like another weapon that was already stuck in their chest out. So animations like that are fun, and there is obviously the mechanics of that, which I guess I didn't really go into the gameplay mechanics, but you can like shoot off their limbs, you can shoot the arm that they have a weapon in and remove that arm, you can shoot off their legs and then they'll crawl at you. Sometimes you'll shoot off the torso and they'll walk at you, the legs will walk at you. I think that was cool, and doing the animations for that was actually really cool, which I'm kind of skipping ahead a little bit, and I think the aesthetic of this game is really awesome. The art style here is really cool. Some of the bosses have a really awesome design, but the city itself is the design that I loved the most. I also liked the creature design, and I mean like the dead animals that you absorb as blood. There's like this sea cow, and I mean like literally it's half normal cow, and then the rest of it is like an oversized dolphin or something combined, and it actually looks really good, I guess. It works in the framework of this world, and I liked that. There's other animals as well that also fit very well into the framework of this world, and I think this game has some really awesome effects with the different weapons and how they hit and what they do when they hit. But like I was kind of complaining about in the gameplay mechanics and whatnot, it does get too dark at times, and I generally, when playing a horror game, crank up the brightness just a little bit for recording, and I had done that here, and even with that, there were areas that were very dark and I wished I had had a flashlight for, but they don't let you control that, as I mentioned. And there are a few areas where it's very dark but no flashlight, and it just would have been nice that if they had lit it better or given you the flashlight so you could really see what's going on. And the weapons were actually these really crazy, weird weapons, like how they drain your blood. Like they have a base level when you pick them up where they look like a normal weapon that would fit very well in the world, but then once you pick them up, your like blood infects them, possesses them, and they change into these weapons that will now drain you of blood to fuel them. And the design is very gaudy and flashy, and it kind of fits with the whole fact that you are the warrior of the sun and you've been given this chance, but you also have to prove yourself kind of thing. They look like these kind of over-the-top sacrificial weapons, but at the same time, they're meant to be used against enemies. I just thought that was a neat design, and I really liked it. So let's get into the wrap up. The first thing I'm gonna say is this game is $20 and it was worth every penny. This was a game where I was really happy with the price, and quite frankly, the quality and the overall experience really surpassed that price tag. There are a few things that I think could have been better, but there was nothing here that took me out of or ruined my experience. I'm really impressed with what this team did. It's a small indie game, and I really think they have potential. I would love to see another game from these guys. I hope this game does well. I recommend this game. Okay, so in the comments down below, why don't you tell me, do you speak another language? I sure as hell don't. And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. And if you like what I'm doing in general, share and subscribe. Have a good one.